7 of those years, I made 35 cents a day. Okay, I added that all up, 19 years times that amount, and it came out to an astronomical figure. And I applied for Social Security, and they told me that I hadn't paid into Social Security because I didn't work. They had no work record of me for the past 20 years. I said I was in prison. They said, well, then you can't claim Social Security. I said, but I was employed in prison. I was being paid by the state of New York, albeit taxpayer money. I was being paid by the state of New York, and I want to claim that as my Social Security pay. I have 2 children, one 3 and one 7. I'm married, and all they send me is a few $100s a month, Social Security, insurance, SSI.
Right, right.
So I'm looking for an attorney to file that because I think that that's a class action. Because you have a lot of long-term people, and you have to remember too, my conviction was overturned.
Wow.
Well,
let us understand something. I know Geronimo Pratt was able to sue and get a large sum of money when his conviction was overturned and he was released. Was that something that was not available to you because you're not a high-powered attorney or something like that, or what was it?
It's the complete opposite.
Okay.
All of the attorneys that I've had, Elizabeth Fink, Robert Boyle, all of these attorneys were first and foremost activists. They were activist attorneys, and they took cases not to make money, but cases to defend our political, civil, and human rights in the cases. So, you know, they were fighters, and they fought the system, and in my behalf, and we won. And when I won, I brought a civil suit against the city of New York, the state of New York, federal government, the whole host, Department of Corrections. And the suit went on for years. And what happened was, and this is the pathetic part, okay? I wanted to go to trial in the suit because I wanted to put the NYPD and the Bureau of Special Services and all of those intelligence agencies on trial. And I thought it was very important at that particular time to do that because the right wing was closing down all avenues of protest in New York and in America at that time, in the mid '80s, early '90s, mid '80s, late '90s. So this was a period when right wing power was consolidating itself in America, and New York elected a black mayor.
Was that Dinkins at the time?
Yes, David Dinkins. He became mayor of New York while my suit was pending. And my suit was for millions of dollars, and Dinkins, as the mayor, could have settled the suit. He could have settled the lawsuit. And so he started negotiating backdoor with me with his friend Bill Lynch, or Dick Lynch.
What a name! All right.
You know, and that was his campaign manager, and later his chief of staff. And he would meet me clandestinely in the back of soul food restaurants in Harlem in order to try to ascertain exactly what was it in my suit that I wanted to settle. He was scared to death. And he was under pressure from the NYPD, and so he never settled the suit. So I went on to take the suit further, and then Giuliani got into office, and Giuliani was approached by the NYPD and the police union and said I was the most hated man that the police department in New York knew, and that he shouldn't settle my suit. So we made a tactical decision that, okay, they wouldn't settle the suit for the amount that I wanted, but if my lawyers collected their fees and everything, you know, it would amount to a considerable amount of money. And so we settled the suit. I got a few $1,000s, maybe like 30, 40,000. Okay. And my lawyers got a considerable amount of money, and they all donated money to my foundation and to my NGO in Africa, and basically
talk a little bit about those foundations, brother. Let us know something about those.
Well, I have started in Africa Institute for the Development of Pan-African Policy, INPAP, in Ghana. I started it back in 1993 when I first went to Africa, and I began working with the Ministry of Culture in Africa around Panafest and around now the holidays that they have commemorating the end of slavery. That entire holiday, actuality, came about as a result of a discussion I had with some people in the administration of the former president of Ghana, Jerry J. Rawlings. And I had a discussion with them about what it was is that Jerry J. Rawlings had went to Jamaica for Jamaican for a holiday. I believe it might have been Bob Marley's celebration. It was to be an inauguration of some type of institution there that had to do with reggae and the Pan-African nature of Jamaica. And they had what they called an emancipation celebration, the ending of slavery. And Jerry John Rawlings was very taken with this ceremony. He wanted Ghana to become a center of Pan-African attention. He wanted to build off the legacy of Kwame Nkrumah, who was Ghanaian, and Ghana as the first independent country to break away from British rule in sub-Saharan Africa. He wanted to have a yearly holiday in which both the cultural and the political nature of Pan-Africanism could come together. So one day I was talking with some close aides of his. We were having breakfast on the veranda of one of his ministers' house. And he told me about Rawlings' trip, and I said, you know what we should do? I said we should create a monument here in Ghana. I had worked with some brothers who were talking about building a tower of return with an eternal light burning like a watchtower, burning on the coast of Ghana, facing out to sea, calling the diaspora back to Africa. It was to be a symbolic place where we would have, museums and libraries and stuff relating to the Holocaust and all of this stuff. So, we talked about this thing for years before. But when I was sitting with these brothers in the Rawlings administration, I suggested, I said, well, what we could do is we should bring back the bones of our ancestors symbolically back through the door of no return. Because the door of no return is has been a curse on the diaspora, that we would never see our motherland again, and that we would never revisit our originality, that we would not recapture our peoplehood again. And I said, so if we were to re-enter back through the door of no return, those who went out the door of no return, then that would be a great symbolic gesture to launch emancipation holidays in the area. So they talked about it and they loved the idea, and that's how emancipation in Ghana, the emancipation holidays began. Because you see, they were, Ghana was a British colony.
Right.
And so to them, emancipation did not coincide with the African diaspora, with African Americans, whose so-called emancipation was on a completely different date, in a completely different time, And so, the Africans that were living in Ghana, the African Americans that were living in Ghana, didn't want to support this emancipation based on that. And so I had to bring my considerable persuasion powers of political analysis to the situation so that they would understand that they were damn fools,
right.
And that the fact that the crackers declared us free was not the point, and that the point was to create a link and a connection culturally and politically between the diaspora and Africa. And to do it in a way that would reclaim ourselves and reclaim our consciousness, because the brainwashing that we went through in the diaspora, what we call the creation of the slave mentality. There was a similar process going on in Africa. It's called the colonized, the colonial mentality. And
always ask people which one was worse, slavery or colonization. Which one, and there's really no way to compare the two. They're both two wicked beasts,
Exactly, because there's a fundamental differences that you can't get around.
Right.
One is that the colonial mentality evolved out of conquest, pure and simple, in which people kept they lived in the same place.
Right.
Their historical enemies were still their historical enemies. They still spoke their language. They still knew who they were. They had their own ceremonies and rituals, and they clung to them. But at the same time, because they were conquered, and Africans have this mentality that because they were conquered, that the conqueror's way must be better than theirs because he conquered them.
How about that?
And although they don't say that, and we tend to get into our rituals, we have to understand that to the Africans, tradition is static. It's not evolving. It's not dynamic. It's static. It's backwards looking. And for the Africans in the diaspora, it's the complete opposite. We are the masters of innovation. Tradition doesn't mean anything to us in that way, in that we will change tradition to meet our immediate condition. And you see that in the way we have done our celebrations, the way we have evolved our culture, and how dynamic we are as a people. So there's a conflict there, and that conflict has to deal with, not a conflict, but a difference. And those fundamental differences of being colonized and being enslaved, of knowing who you are and where you are but having no power, and having everything taken from you and told you was something else and having no power, is fundamentally two different things.
Gotcha. Definitely understand that point. Let me ask you one last question here, brother. And one of the things that has haunted a lot of our people who have made repatriation and have gone other places, what say you to those who say, why go over to Africa and start a program and start something with them when right now in New York City, the crime rate, the homeless rate, the unemployment rate is probably 1,000 times worse now than it was, when you were locked up, when you were younger, 20, 30 years ago. Why go all the way over to Africa? Not to say that our people there don't need our assistance, but it's almost to say that here in America we're doing okay and we don't need the assistance. What say you to those people who say, why go there and not start here?
Well, because we're talking about globalization. Globalization is a consequence of imperialism. Modern globalization is New Age.